What if retirement isn't the reward we were promised, but the beginning of a new kind of identity crisis? Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies that help us live longer, healthier, and more purposeful lives. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age. My guest is Jerjian, a retirement mindset mentor, creator of the DARE method, and an Emmy-winning storyteller. George's work is grounded in research from a 20,000 retiree survey that explores what really happens when people leave work behind. George speaks to adults ages 55 to 75 who are navigating longer lifespans and shorter cultural scripts for what retirement is supposed to be. He believes many of us aren't meant to retire in a traditional sense, but to unretire, to re-engage life with purpose, creativity, and vitality. Today, we're talking about retirement mindset, identity, and how we age well with meaning. George, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Let's just have you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you to focus on the mindset side of retirement rather than just the financial side.
Jeff, thank you for having me on your show. I'm delighted to be here. And so what's, gosh, I think it's got to start back in 2007 when I was diagnosed with a bone tumor and given 6 months to live. That will change your mind. That will change your world and your perspective. Thankfully, it was misdiagnosed. Well, it wasn't misdiagnosed. I was diagnosed with a bone tumor and told that in 98% of cases, bone tumors are secondary cancers, which means it's spread through your body and you're looking at 6 months of life. So for 3 weeks, I was under that sword of Damocles. And they did all kinds of tests, which I'm not going to go into, but each one of them is an interesting thing. But we don't have time for that. So I'm going to focus on 3 weeks later, I'm told that I belong to the 2% club. My bone tumor is localized and benign, but it was aggressive because it was the size of a large eggplant sitting on my pelvis. 2 operations. The first operation was to block all the arteries to the tumor. Otherwise, it would have been a bloodbath. And the second operation was to remove it, and it came out in 3 pieces. There wasn't, they needed 40-foot containers to move it out. I don't know why. It was huge. In any event, what surprised me about finding out, well, my rendezvous with death was that I wasn't afraid of death, which was bizarre because I thought I'd crap in my pants. Yes, sir. But I was very anxious that my 2 teenage daughters weren't going to have me around. That was eating away at me. So when I discovered that my bone tumor was benign and that I was going to survive it, I punched the air. I was so happy about it. And even the fact that I would be out of commission for 6 months didn't take the joy out of it for me because I knew I'd survived. But you can't unknow what you know. Recognizing that, I'd faced down death, I realized how valuable my time was. And I'd never valued my time in the sense that I value it now. So each day is a lifetime. And most people don't realize that because we're sleepwalking through our lives, thinking that, we are immortal. We know we're not, but we delude ourselves into thinking we're immortal because the way we live is like tomorrow's guaranteed. And it's obviously not. And I think we cheat ourselves. And I'm a slow learner, so it took me 10 years of semi-retirement to realize that I can't just drift. I've got to do something meaningful. And I was feeling, I'd retired, semi-retired, thinking that I can do what I want, when I want, how I want, on the face of death being top of mind. But that is not a way to live. I was just filling time instead of being fulfilled, using time up to fulfill myself. And I realized that it's not about satisfying myself. It's about being of service. And when you're in service to something bigger than you, that's when joy comes into the picture. And so I decided to unretire, and I went on a 30-day silent retreat to cut all the noise out in my life, all the influences, all that inner dialogue, and to listen deeply to what I wanted to do with my life. So that was kind of my first part of the journey, facing death and being a slow learner, taking 9 years to realize retirement is not the solution, because that's how deeply we've been influenced about retirement is like a rite of passage. It's something that you're entitled to, and it's that it's going to give you everything you've dreamt of that you couldn't do before. It's complete nonsense. It's a Ponzi scheme, period.
Really?
Right? Now, I'm not talking about the money. The money is a side issue. It's very important. I don't want to give the impression that money is not important. Money is important, but our lives are possibly more important than the money, because you can have that money and lead a meaningless life. And what's the point? And that's where I started my journey to discover myself and pursue. It was in that spiritual retreat of 30 days that I decided I wanted to have a new life, a new outlook. And I then subscribed to Bob Proctor, the late success coach, Canadian success coach, who dealt it with mindset and how to change it. And so I spent a great deal of time learning for about 18 months with him, and then doing my own bits of learning. And when I realized that the people I needed to serve were people like me, people who are retired but have no idea what comes next.
If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing, and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below, and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast. This is such a perfect fit for the Aging Well podcast. I am so excited for this conversation, because I think we're going to get a very different dimension of retirement and really, again, what we're talking about when we talk about what it means to age well. And part of your learning involved a 20,000 retiree survey, if I understand correctly. So what patterns surprised you most from that survey?
That's such a good question. What shocked me was that 50% of that 23,000 people who had completed my 9-question survey, 50% said health was their single biggest challenge. Health. Now, let me give you perspective here. This was during the pandemic. So, obviously people were concerned about their health, but 50% was astonishing for me. The second one was 35% said fear of outliving their savings. And the rest was having no purpose, aimlessness. I did ask a secondary question after that. A couple of questions after that was, if you had a magic wand, what would you address or change? 50% said health again. And this time, 36% said finding a new purpose. So people recognize, give them agency and they know what to do. But after I'd finished this survey, what I discovered, Jeff, was that, you know how you tick all the boxes and then you think there's something missing? I'm missing something here. So I went back to the drawing board. And whilst I was doing my going through, I came across a quote from Henry Ford, who said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And that was my aha moment. I realized I'd asked people what they thought was the issue, and they told me what they thought it was. But people don't know what they don't know. Those are not really the primary issues. Those are the obvious issues that come top of mind. But the underlying issue in retirement is an identity issue. Who am I now? Without my job. And in a sense, our jobs are the scaffolding to our identity. When our job goes, our identity falls apart. For the vast majority. So in this next stage of life, we can't go without an identity because our survival is at stake. We all need to be somebody. Very difficult for us. Only I think, very spiritually strong people can be a nobody and are happy to be a nobody. But most of us frail human beings, we need to be somebody. Even if it's as lowly as a janitor, I want to be somebody, right? And
right.
it just gives us what's the word I'm looking for? It gives us an armor to put around ourselves that makes us feel safer. And so if you're going to choose an identity, my question to myself was, who do I want to be? And the question, the response I came about was, I actually want to help people. And I want to be a better person than I have been. And that would give me joy, right? Note, again, thanks to one of your previous guests, Dr. Kelly Burnright, I think her name was,
Yes.
who talked about joy span, which I found a really intriguing, and I loved it. And it resonated with me because, and I've talked about, it's not about happiness. The American Constitution talks about the pursuit of happiness. We can't pursue happiness. It's like a mist. But happiness happiness ensues when we do things, the good things, the right things. Happiness comes. But I think happiness is kind of the wrong word even. I think joy is the word we're looking for. And the reason for that is happiness is fleeting. It's like going shopping, buying something that you like. After you've bought it, taken it home or worn it, you've forgotten about it. It's gone. Joy is something that you can have even when you're going through difficult times in your life. Because you're doing something worthwhile. You're doing something worthy. And so what happens on a daily basis is we all have challenges in life, but joy is the thing that carries you through. So I don't know why I went to joy for a second. I need to go back to my thinking. How did I come back to joy? Yes, identity. It's about finding who we want to be in this next chapter of our lives and what purpose we want to serve. And those on the face of it look like easy questions, but they're not. And the reason they're not is because we have lied to ourselves for so long that it's difficult to get rid of these paradigms that we have in our heads. And so it takes time to change the inner dialogue.
I like this. This is really well stated. And we talk a lot on this podcast about purpose with a capital P. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. And is kind of go back to the conversation with Dr. Burnnight as well. It's, joy, identity really form the foundation for that big P purpose. And so many of us, we spend our lives in that small P purpose where our identity is, I'm an accountant, I'm a exercise physiology professor, I'm a father, I am a husband, and not really getting to who are we really. And I think that's a profound conclusion that you've come to. And I think it's an important thing for our viewers and listeners to hear and to understand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jeff. And I think Dr. Kelly actually did capture quite a bit of this, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But I think the way she was coming through was I was getting what she was saying. And I think she was absolutely right. But you're also right, because purpose with a capital P, people think, well, who the hell do you think you are to have a big P? Right?
Right.
You have to be an egomaniac to have a big P. But actually, that's not true. I think we're all capable of having a big P purpose, as it were, a purpose with a big P, because I think we have a higher self that we're disconnected from. And particularly in these challenging times that we live in, where we can't tell, well, we know the difference between truth and lies, but the entire social media is permeated with so much falsehood that you just, I'm almost lost for words. Well, I am lost for words, because we're trapped in this place where if we allow it, we drown in this stuff. And the only way I feel that we can survive this and surmount it and come, rise above it, is to reach out to our higher selves. So, for example, I studied people like Cicero. Cicero wrote a book in his old age, and it was called On Old Age. And in it, he had 10 lessons, and they're really basic, but so profound. And they speak from like over 2,000 years ago, they still speak with freshness and resonance to us today. And it's like one of them, for example, would be like, what other people think is none of our business. And we are imprisoned in our heads by what other people think, which stops us from moving forward and doing what we should and want to be doing. So I tell my clients, I take them to their deathbed and I say, you're on your deathbed. Do you really think that you care about what other people will be thinking now? And given what you now know, would you still continue doing what you did? Or did you miss out on doing something profound that you wanted to do? Even if whatever it is that you're doing or want to do is not significant in the big picture of things, it could be significant in the community that you live in. It could change the lives of a lot of people in your community just you being who you're meant to be. And so, and the other thing I use a question is, I use a quote from American mythologist Joseph Campbell, who said, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And I realized what he meant by the cave. He's talking about our mind. It's a cavern. And we're afraid to delve into that. We're afraid to turn stones over to see what's underneath, because we're so afraid we're going to find what, oh my God, what will I find? And it'll take me away from the people I love. A scary thing, right? But actually, it's liberating to find out what it is that you'd love to do. Because if you're happy with what you're going to be doing, don't you think your family is going to be contaminated by that joy or happiness that you're feeling? And imagine how that will impact and teach your children and grandchildren by taking that action, instead of drifting into oblivion and trying to please people around you by not ruffling feathers.
Before we continue, I want to take a brief moment to highlight an affiliate brand that supports the work we do here. As always, this podcast isn't sponsored. Affiliate partnerships simply help us keep producing meaningful conversations around aging well. One product line I've personally vetted and believe in is Primadine from Oxford HealthSpan. Their commitment to purity, scientific rigor, and thoughtful formulation stands out, and I use their products as part of my own wellness practice. If you want to support the podcast while exploring Primadine for yourself, you can find the link in the show notes. And I challenge you a little bit. You said, people are capable of big P purpose. I think we're intended for big P purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think it's our job to kind of help bring that out in people as well. And I like to, when I write the word extraordinary, I put parentheses around extra, because a lot of people think in order to be extraordinary or to have that big P purpose, you have to have, like you said, a level of significance. You have to be a celebrity, or you have to be well known, or you have to be in a position of power. And extraordinary and purpose can all come from the simplest of people. Whatever your role in life is, if you're, what you might say, oh, I'm just a custodian at the elementary school. Well, you can change lives, affect people so effectively in that position. I had a guest on my other podcast who talked about, I think it was the other podcast, or no, it was this podcast, but he talked about the influence of the bus driver when he was in elementary school. He's talking to the bus driver, and it's like, why are you just a bus driver? And she's like, I wouldn't have any other position. And it's like, I get to, interact with you kids every day, and, get to drive you to school so that you can learn. And just, she had this great sense of purpose in what she was doing. She says, I could be a teacher, but, I make as much as the teachers are making. And I get to, in the middle of the day, we sit in the break room and play cards. And, it's a pretty easy life, but I get to impact you kids. And, it was in that moment of that conversation, he realized how much impact that woman had on his life going forward. And, we don't think that we get influenced by other people, or we don't think that we influence people. And I think, just the simplest thing of interacting, even giving a smile to somebody as you pass them on the street, can have a profound effect on our world. It's like,
that is so true. That is so, so true. And it doesn't cost you much to smile at people. No. You're absolutely right. And actually, let's talk about the big P and the small p for purpose. I mean, I wrote a book called Dare to Discover Your Purpose. And I had a few heavyweight gerontologists and educationalists who kind of said, well, not everybody has a big P in their purpose, a lot of people are happy with a small P in their purpose. And I go, yeah, possibly. But my sense was that you are right, Jeff. I think everybody has the capacity for a big P in their purpose, because it's not about your station in life or your job or whatever it is you do. It's how you do it and how you approach that. And really, I think it's the energy and love you bring to your job and your work, which makes the difference between the kind of purpose that you have. Is it with a big P or a small P? So it's not the title, as you said.
Yeah. So what do you mean by unretirement?
Okay. The whole concept of retirement is something I've studied. All right. I mean, in our recorded history, retirement was initiated by a guy called Caesar Augustus, who introduced it to get the Imperial Roman army on side after his uncle Julius was assassinated. And ever since then, it's been a way of holding people close so they don't, well, in his case, he didn't want any of them to overthrow him. So he wanted to make sure all his generals and his soldiers were well looked after. Now, a lot of them didn't make it to old age, but those who did were greatly compensated. And then, of course, you had Abraham Lincoln later introduced pensions to young soldiers for recruiting purposes for the Union Army. Bismarck of Germany introduced it because he was fearful the Marxists were going to overwhelm Germany, because the Germans were falling in love with Marxism. And so everybody had a reason for doing this. Even Roosevelt introduced it because some guy in California was recommending that everybody in the United States should get a pension. And Roosevelt panicked and introduced a pension where people had to contribute to it, so it wasn't free. But there's always a reason, and companies introduced it as golden handcuffs to hold their employees down so they wouldn't go. But longevity, of course, has killed the retirement equation. Because back in the day when you retired, you lived for 2-3 years, you got your golden watch, and you passed away soon after, from boredom probably. But now, in the last 20 years and more, long life, people are living to the age of mid-80s, and we're even moving towards the age of 100s. And whatever monies you've saved in your pension or retirement or your IRA or 401s is never going to cover you till you die. And that's why such a large number of people know they're going to outlive their savings. So people stay on and work. But what they don't realize is that you don't need to stay on and work in your current job for the rest of your life or for as long as you can go. Because if you've got another 20 plus years, why not find something you love to do? And then, hey, you won't have to work another day. But to answer your question about unretirement, I introduced that word, although it existed before me. I introduced unretirement because you have to enjoy, I think, retirement for about 12 months, maybe 18 months. Do your bucket list before it's too late. Don't postpone that bit. Satiate yourself with all the things you wanted to do in retirement. And by 18 months, the honeymoon period is over for you. You're done. And at this point, if you're forewarned early enough, you'll know time to unretire and find a new identity and a new purpose for this next chapter of your life. But you have to unretire. You have to make that rite of passage. And I call it a gap year, a sabbatical. And to that extent, I went on my own gap year back in 2024. I went on an epic gap year. And I'm so happy I did it, because I wouldn't be able to do it again now. I wouldn't be able to be insured. I'm 70 now, 71. And I went when I was 69. So I just managed to get an insurance cover to take me around the world in 80 days, which is something I've always wanted to do, having read Jules Verne's book. And I thought to myself, I really want to do this. And then that inner dialogue was, it's too much money, it's too much time. Don't be childish, forget this. This is mad. And as soon as I started dabbling, looking into prices, hotels, where I was going to go, what countries would I go to, how long would I spend in each country, I was so excited. My spirit was so uplifted. I thought, this feels too good to say no to. And I did eventually go on that 80-day journey, which I loved and opened up my mind to new opportunities. And I don't recommend people do around the world in 80 days. So let me just put that out there. But you can go and live for a couple of months in a different state, even in a different town, whatever it is. Just get out of the coziness of where you live, the comfort of the friends that you currently have. Go take the risk of learning new, to have a beginner's mindset. And you will be shocked at how kind people are. Because also you're humbler, because you're now in foreign territory. It's not your comfort zone. So you are changing because you realize you need other human beings. And when you recognize that you're not the all-powerful person that you think you are in your local place, you're slightly humbler. And when you're humbler, people respond to you in a different way. I quote one guy, the author Paulo Coelho, who wrote The Alchemist. And he talks that, travel, it's not about becoming someone or becoming something. It's about unbecoming who we are, so that we can become who we really are. It's about getting rid of the masks that we have placed on ourselves, and unbecoming. And in a sense, that encapsulates what my Around the World in 80 Days did for me. I discovered my better part, my higher part, the person that I would like to be, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And it got me wanting to retire so I can unretire. Because I've never really given thought to retirement. I just kind of looked at, okay, well, how would I work differently once I can kind of finally get past my teaching assignment and do something else? Part of what I'm doing right now is something I hope that, carries me into, I guess, my unretirement. But yeah, you're right. We need to get reconnected with ourselves, and maybe just connected with ourselves, because how many of us go through our entire lives never really fully understanding who we are or what our big P purpose is?
Yeah, and I think you're right, because I think what it is that when we're young, we're students, and then we move into the adult world, we take a gap year. Not all of us, obviously, but young people take a gap year to get to know who they are. But we don't have a rite of passage when we stop work before we retire. There's no bridge, there's no rite of passage. And it's not a linear road. You can't just walk into retirement. Something massively is going to change in your life. And you can't just pretend it's just, it's a walkthrough. It's seismic. Because almost And of course, it differs from person to person. But for example, if you've been in a specific line of work for X number of years and you retire, your identity, who you were, is gone, but you're not aware that that is gone. So you're hanging on to that, right? All your certificates are up on the wall in your home office, and your cups and your awards or whatever you have. That's part of who you were. And people are so enamored with that identity of theirs that, frankly, they're scared to move anywhere in a new direction, because their entire world, the world under their feet, will collapse. And it's a scary place to be. But you're imprisoned in your own mind. And how do you make that transition? I think there's two ways. One, you really got to do some exploration. And I talk about an inventure. You got to go within. The answers are within. You're not going to find the answers outside of you. And most of us are looking outside. But the answers are within. And that's the last place we look for it.
Let's pause for a moment to thank the affiliate partners who help support the Aging Well podcast. We're not sponsored and no company pays for airtime here. But when you use our affiliate links, it helps us keep producing thoughtful, evidence-informed content. One brand I genuinely trust is Aura Wellness, especially their Glutarol, Glutarol Plus, and copper peptide formulations. I've spent time vetting their science, their ingredient quality, and their transparency. And I personally use these products in my own wellness routine. If you're interested in supporting the podcast and exploring tools that may help you feel and function better, check out Aura Wellness in the show notes. It brings me to the question about your DARE method, and that's an acronym, I assume, DARE method. What does each part represent?
Okay. If I may take a step back, DARE is an acronym, correct? But it's also another word for courage. And people, I think, I didn't understand what courage was in the same level I do now. Courage comes from the Latin word cor, meaning heart. And again, we always look for the answers in our head, not our heart. We don't trust our heart so much because we've spent years enslaving it to make sure it follows what we're thinking. You need to have heart to make the right decisions. We're not who we think we are. We've created a facade, a mask. And over the years, we've chiseled that mask. So the strongest part of us is what we show the world out there. No weakness, no chinks in the armor. But I think, as Dr. Brené Brown talks about, is our strength actually is in our vulnerability, not our invincibility. And we're never taught that. We're taught to get strong. We're not taught to show weakness, whereas actually weakness is strength, in the sense the paradox is that if you are strong enough to be able to show your vulnerability, that is a power. That's what connects you to people. So when you're honest and authentic, people know it. You can't mask that. You can't pretend it. Well, I mean, you can. I'm not sure how effective it will be, but and so being authentic and being vulnerable takes courage, but it also shows strength. And so courage is an important component to unretire and discover new layers of identity that you have, that are parts of you that you've not used. And this next stage of life you need to get those aspects of your personality and who you are out there so you can use it. Again, it's a power. So you don't need to stick back and try to find work in areas of where you were before, which is what we do as a fallback. Why can't I find the work that I've been doing all these years? Because I say this as a joke. Nobody wants you there. You're meant for higher things, the things that you're afraid of. That's where you need to be looking. And so dare is courage, but it's also an acronym, as you quite rightly said, Jeff. D, the letter D is for discover. Discover what retirement is and what it's not. There are 8 billion people out there. There's 8 billion definitions of retirement. But most of them are floozies because there's the real stuff about what retirement is and what it's not. And a lot of it is illusionary and delusions, not reality based. And so when we get rid of the delusions and illusions, we're left with what we've got, and it doesn't look pretty. So how do you address it? So I try to get people to understand what retirement is and what it's not, and to get rid of the illusions and delusions of it so they can face the reality. The next letter, A, is assimilate. Assimilate new information about how our mind works. Right? We think we understand what thinking is. What we don't realize is that the subconscious mind is such a powerful aspect of our mind, and we've never been taught how it works and how we can use it to our advantage. So just for example, we think our conscious mind, if I make a decision, I'm going to stick with it, right? How many times have you used willpower for a New Year's resolution? And how did that work out for you?
I don't do New Year's resolutions.
There you go. You've given up.
No, I haven't given up. I just have evolved more of a mindset that change is necessary, and I have to have a growth mindset. And I grow day by day, moment by moment, rather than waiting until new calendar, flip a new calendar around, and now I have to make change. And, if I don't make New Year's resolutions, but I resolve what I'm going to do today, I have a motto: be your best today, be better tomorrow. And if I do that, if I stumble today, if I don't do well, I haven't failed. I've learned something to go into the next day. And so that's always been kind of my mindset. I don't remember the last time I ever really did New Year's resolutions.
Yeah. No, fair point. The reason I bring it up is because it's not about consciously making a resolution or a decision as to what you're going to do. Our subconscious mind has paradigms, and it works like a thermostat. If you hit the thermostat above it, it'll bring it back. If you hit below it, it'll bring it back. It's like a thermostat. That's the way the paradigm works. And so how do you overcome that? You need to change the script in your head, right? So, which comes to the growth mindset and fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is, I can't do this. The growth mindset is, I can't do this yet. That's a pivot. Mm-hmm. 3-letter word, yet, pivots from an absolute, I can't do this, to I can't do it yet, which means I can do it soon. Or what? So it changes the dynamic of the plasticity of how you move here. So it's about knowing how to work with your subconscious mind so that you can align it. And it's about changing the script in your head. R is rewire, which is that script we're talking about, right? And E is for expand, because once you open the rewiring aspect of your head, the Japanese have a word called shoshin, which means a beginner's mindset. A beginner's mindset is one of, I'm not an expert, I don't know, but I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm curious. I'm very intrigued by a certain work or something, a hobby or whatever it might be that you want to do. And you come in with humility because you're a beginner and you learn. And when you're in that state of mind, the possibilities are endless. If you come in as a know-it-all, an expert, everything's very limited because you've already crossed out everything. So this is all you've got left and you'd have no room to maneuver. And so that's where the rewiring comes. And the expansion is, well, with 20 plus years to go as a retiree, why would you be shutting things down? Why would you be making your sandbox smaller and smaller and smaller? It's not God's waiting room. You got 20 plus years to go. And this is where I love introducing Mary Oliver, the American poet laureate, who said, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? What will you do with your one wild and precious life? And that's a question we should all be asking.
And it's not a question that, we ask early in life. We can ask it every day.
Yes.
I think of, one of my blog is titled Carpe Memento. I wanted to call it Carpe Friggin Diem, but my dad pointed out to me, and you would know that friggin is kind of somewhat derogatory in your neck of the woods. And so, okay, I won't do it. And so I kept it as Carpe Memento. But, it's just seize the moment. We talk about seize the day, but that, there's still hours and minutes ahead of you in the day, but the moment you have right now, what are you going to do right now? Because this next step that you take is going to have a tremendous impact on the world. You might not think it, but it's going to. And it's the same thing, when we want to go back in time. I bring this up a lot on this podcast. People ask the question, what would you do? What would you change if you can go back in time? I wouldn't change anything because I'm where I'm at right now for the purpose of being here right now. And it's not a matter of, can I change the past to get somewhere else? I can change the future by just changing the moment.
Exactly.
And that's the mindset I think you're talking about. And I love it.
Exactly. And, to your point as well, because I know that your work is on physical fitness and there's a lot to be said for that. Energy, physicality, it's all integrated. The mind, you have to bring your mind to your physical energy, right? To direct it, to push it in the right direction. And then there's the emotional side. We talk about nutrition and wellness and all that stuff, all good things. But there's also nurturing our emotional needs and our psychological needs. And I'd even go as far as to say our spiritual needs. And so it's an integrative thing. And, we talked about joy, and our joy covers purpose. It covers spirituality. It covers quite a few of these areas. And so it's kind of holistic. It's not one, you can't just do 2 or 3 and ignore the rest.
We, on this podcast, I've long referred to it as well-centered fitness, being, coming from exercise physiology. Of course, I'm going to have a more, exercise perspective to things, but always address the model of wellness is, spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. And it was a friend of mine, Jay, from high school, and Jay's getting sick of me pointing out every time I talk about spies, I give him credit for it. But, we were having a conversation once because, we reconnected years after high school, and he started listening to the podcast. And he's like, I noticed you always talk about, the spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. He said, are you intentional in putting it in that order? And I'm like, well, sort of, because I think the spiritual and the physical are the most important. But he's like, because it spells out the acronym SPIES. I never thought of that before. And so now we refer to it as the SPIES model. But I think all five of those are so critically important. But if we don't start with the foundation of both the physical and the spiritual, and I wholly believe that we are evolving toward where the spiritual and the physical are returning to being kind of one, where you can't separate our physical and the spiritual. I mean, you go into physics. Physics is getting so small, we're getting smaller and smaller to eventually we're going to get to a point where we no longer have any more material. We have to have that, whatever's in between, and that's, I think it was Aristotle that talked about form and matter. And, you go the opposite direction, you expand and expand and expand in the universe. Eventually, we're so spread out and so big, what's left? And you don't have to believe in a God, you don't have to believe in religion, but this idea that there is something bigger than self is so essential to us functioning as human beings.
I think without question. I think science and spirituality are also getting closer and closer together. Mm-hmm. In the sense of, and let's not mix religion with spirituality, mm-hmm. but spirituality doesn't have borders. I think quantum physics has also changed the outlook of science on spirituality and spirituality on science. It's literally two sides of the same coin. And quantum physics is about energy. It's not about matter, energy. And so, hence Einstein's E equals to mc squared. He didn't do it with M. He didn't start with mass. He started with energy. And everything in life has energy. And Einstein said, you can't create or destroy energy. You can only transform it. So take, we have energy, spirit. When we die, the spirit leaves and we're gone. We're just a carcass. If you look at a piece of wood, a wooden chair or a wooden table, it has energy. It has energy in there. It's not just matter. And the energy is moving, but it's very slow and very spread out. Whereas obviously water, light, much faster. I think our conception of who we are, and what life is evolving. And we know, what we know is only such a small fraction of what life is. But it's conversations that get us out.
Yeah. And I love it going into those deeper conversations. I mean, you mentioned experts, and that's a word I really, really hate because I think, as a PhD, I'll tell my students that, when we talk about degrees, it's like the BS is bullshit, the MS is more shit, and a PhD is just piled higher and deeper. And there's also that phrase that, PhDs learn more and more about less and less until they know everything about absolutely nothing. And I think that's a very unfortunate aspect of those who would call themselves experts, is that they think they know it all. And the true expert, the true person of knowledge and understanding is the person that realizes, I know, the more I know, how little I know. And I've been teaching for coming up on 30 years, and I'm like, I have so much more to learn and so much to unlearn. And I tell my students, don't believe everything I tell you, challenge it, because good chance I'm wrong. I might be right in the moment, but knowledge is growing and evolving, and we're learning and understanding things better. We can't be trapped in the moment.
Yeah, true. Very true. And I think this is why this concept of ego and, I'm a somebody, is such a dangerous place to be, because the minute you start thinking that you're important is when you're stepping into dangerous territory.
Yeah.
The illusion of I know everything, the hubris. You're ready to be a golf ball, ready to get whacked. Not a great place to be. And being a nobody is not so easy for us humans. Not so easy. But But I find it worthwhile exploring that from time to time. And I found that when I was traveling, I was closer to being a nobody.
So do you think in retirement, part of our struggle as we retire is that, we build ourselves up in our own mind to be a somebody. And then we retire and realize, well, we're really not, because we've just been replaced by somebody younger that just took our position and is doing our job. The world does not fall apart when we stop working.
Well, that's a terrible place to be. I know, but that's a terrible place to be, isn't it? To find out that, oh my God, the world carries on without me. My dad, my dad had Alzheimer's for 10 years, and he was a somebody. Particularly as I was growing up, he was a somebody. And as he aged and had Alzheimer's, we were in a family gathering one time, and people stopped talking to him because of his Alzheimer's. He had no conversation. I'm talking about family members, right? And I don't blame them, because if you don't have conversation with somebody, you don't know what to say, right? So you pull away. And people who have Alzheimer's feel that because they're still cognizant. They're not completely gone. And he turned to me and he said, "Am I a ghost?" That killed me. Am I a ghost? And then my mother, who passed away this January at the age of 98, she had dementia, full blown at the end. And I've been saying to myself that I never want to be in that place. And my mother was a woman who swam 100 laps every day till the age of 80, until she got pneumonia and then stopped. But so she was a strong woman. I think that's why she lasted 10 years through. But both of them didn't find themselves a new identity and a new purpose when their old life kind of came to an end. They didn't reinvent themselves to give themselves a new lease on life, so to speak. And I'm trying to avoid that. I may bump into something different, but life is what it is. But I'm consciously trying to make my life meaningful. And take each day as it comes and enjoy each day as though it were my last, because you don't know when you're checking out.
Let's take a brief pause to recognize one of the affiliate offerings that helps support the Aging Well podcast. As always, we're not sponsored and we don't accept paid placements, but when you use our affiliate links, it helps us continue producing this show. One product I genuinely enjoy is Firefly Organic Coffee, available through Jigsaw Health. It's thoughtfully sourced, organic, and crafted for people who care about what goes into their bodies, not just what wakes them up. I vetted it, I drink it myself, and I appreciate the care behind how it's made. If you'd like to support the podcast and check out Firefly Organic Coffee, you'll find the link in the show notes. Now, back to the show. So do you think, to a certain extent, that lack of purpose may have contributed to your parents' dementia?
I think so. When you have no more purpose, you drift into oblivion. Day follows night, night follows day, and it's another day, it's another, and there's nothing happening.
Now, we started this podcast, and it kind of evolved just from me teaching a pathophysiology and exercise class and just having some interest in, improving physical fitness as I age. And I'd learned from teaching pathophysiology that really there are 4 key things to do to age well, to have longevity. And that was to be physically active and exercise, eat a healthy diet, maintain a healthy body composition, and don't smoke. Those are the things that kind of come up repeatedly in my classes. And since doing this podcast, sleep has come up a lot, the importance of good sleep hygiene. But most importantly, I think what I've learned is that it is purposeful, and I'm very intentional about putting purposeful in front of this, social connections, that we have those purposeful social connections. And without that, forget about exercise, diet, or any of that kind of stuff. You're not going to age well.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, and again, I'm cautious not to put any of the other components out of the equation, because you can have purpose, but if you don't look after yourself physically, you don't look after your health, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Purpose is important, but you can't diminish the other parts of the equation that you need to look after. And at the end of the day, I think most of us, if we love what we do, we tend to look after ourselves. And I think, if you have a reason to jump out of bed in the morning, you are going to be doing the right things on the other stuff because you're happy. You're in this joyful state. So, you want to look after yourself, you want to have a good time, and social connection, hugely important. I think loneliness is a scourge. And back in the old days, in medieval days, when they used to throw people out of their villages and towns for embezzling and whatever, the biggest punishment was sending them out of the village. And, it wasn't about being afraid to be eaten by wolves or bears. It was being alone. That was the killer. Solitary confinement in prisons, that's what kills. So social engagement, we're social animals. Even the most introverted of us, we're social beings. And so to be mentally engaged and to be socially engaged, I think I think these are very important. And I think if you are working in a job that serves people and that fulfills you, you're halfway there.
Yeah. So how has your understanding of aging and purpose changed through this work that you've been doing? You've alluded to a lot of it already, but...
I think I have a stronger understanding about what's kind of important making this transition. And I don't know if this is the right thing, but it's the top of mind here, so I'm going to share this with you. In the Greek monastery, Mount Athos in Greece, there is a saying written in stone above a portal, which dates from pre-Christian times. Again, back to Cicero. And on that stone, it says in Greek, and I'll translate it into English, if you die before you die, when you die, you won't die. Now, what it's trying to say is if you die before you die, in other words, the person who you think you were, if you have that ego death and you let that thing, that part of you die, so the new person, your higher self or who you were meant to be is allowed to emerge. When you die, you won't die because you're now living the life that you were going to live post-death, so to speak. Does that even make sense?
That makes perfect sense to me. And I've heard it in a lot of different contexts. And every time I do, it also makes me think of the whole Christian concept of being born again, and that, you have to be born again to enter in the kingdom of God. Well, it's not unlike what you just said. You have to die to be born and to be able to live. And, once we get that, I think life just opens up for us. And it doesn't have to be a religious belief for you. That is spiritual to me. It's having a purpose spiritual. Greater than self.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's this whole concept of, death and resurrection. Your old self has to die. There's an ego death that happens. And gosh, don't you want to be doing this now and not on your deathbed when it's too late to do something about it? So in a sense, retirement and unretiring is your best life is yet to come. Don't miss out on it. Don't sell yourself short. That's kind of the language that I like to kind of share with people, is that, your best self is yet to come.
Church I attend, we do a 90th birthday. Anybody that's turned 90 or turning 90 or is older, every year they have kind of a little birthday celebration for them. And last year was the first time I went to one of them, and there was a woman there who's 100. And I said, it's fascinating. What's your secret to living to 100? And she said, oh, well, my father lived to be 106. And she talked about how he, in his 80s, had written a memoir, and turns around again in his 90s and had to write a second edition to it because he had done so much in that decade, after he had written the first memoir. And one of the things that he had done, he's the oldest person ever to go to the North Pole. And I guess it was the Russian sea captain that, the captain of the ship he was on, had the engineer form a key for him. It was the key to the North Pole because of, just the accomplishment of what he did. And she was just like, she was of that mindset that, there's so much more for me to do. It's not an accomplishment to get to 100. It's what do I do next?
Yeah.
And
definitely.
I thought it was just a fascinating conversation. And to think that this guy did so much after he wrote his memoir that, our next chapter isn't, it's unwritten. And,
Exactly.
it doesn't say the end until, it's the end.
Definitely.
So in that vein, what are you doing personally to age well?
Gosh. I think I'm trying to, in a nutshell, I'm trying to become really comfortable with being uncomfortable. In other words, there's a part of me that likes the comfort of home, and then there's a part of me that likes adventure. If I stay in one place too long, I get antsy. If I stay out too long on the road, so to speak, I crave for home. And so it's finding that balance and not getting too enamored of one or the other. Trying to find comfort in that instability and making that instability a form of stability. It's kind of living in a paradox, which nobody teaches us to live in a paradox, even though I would say probably 99% of the planet lives in a paradox.
I like that. It's the idea of being uncomfortable with being comfortable, but being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So if someone who's listening or viewing this podcast feels stuck in retirement right now, what's the first step you recommend?
Buy my book, Dare to Discover Your Purpose. And I have a free course that's a kind of a 1 hour webinar and 3 exercises to get your juices flowing. And then you can do my course. I also have a retreat here in the UK happening at the end of April for 15 people only. But that's just in the UK, end of April. So, and that's my first one ever, because I've done all the others. I've never done a physical retreat. And I've always wanted to, because I think a physical retreat, there's a different chemistry that comes about. And I'm on a learning journey myself. So, it's a new beginning for me doing this physical retreat as opposed to doing it online. But I bit the bullet and I'm doing it and I'm excited.
Sounds exciting. I think we've gotten too comfortable with Zoom calls and, connecting with one another via social media, Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And we're losing the ability to interact in person.
Yeah. And I think interacting in person is back in vogue now because people are tired of just being electronically connected.
And I think there's a certain energy there. I mean, again, going back to that quantum physics and spirituality, I mean, we're connecting in so many different ways. Just the the energy that our bodies put off, the oxygen that we're breathing in, the CO2 we're breathing out, we're sharing all of that. And there's a certain connectedness that comes with the physical proximity and that deep social connection.
Oh, definitely. I think there's I mean, we're actually chemical. We're chemicals in a shrink-wrapped physical body, but we actually, when we say we have chemistry with somebody, we actually do. The words we use are translating into actually what's happening. It's like, you have chemistry with certain people and not with others, because there's a resonance happening between two people or three people. And it's real, it's genuine, it's physical, it's chemical, which you don't have it on a Zoom call. Although I've heard some people talk about digital intimacy, which is true, because depending on what energy you bring to the communication, you can have that, but it's not quite the same as the physical. There's a massive difference, I think.
So where can our viewers and listeners find your book, connect with you to learn more about, the workshops and the different services that you just mentioned?
Probably the easiest one is to go to my website, which is Jerjian.com. That's Jerjian.com.
And we'll provide that link in the description notes. So anything we failed talking about? I feel like we could go on for hours here, getting deeper and deeper into this, and we'll have to bring you back in.
Happy to do that, Jeff. It's been a very enjoyable hour and a bit.
Yeah, I love it. And just keep doing what you're doing. Keep driving people to unretire and keep aging well. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Aging Well podcast. Please like, subscribe or follow, and share this episode with a friend. And be sure to visit the affiliate links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep aging well.